And thanks, Kevin. We're going to move on to our next section, which is copyright, which I always find fascinating, but and something important to consider when you're putting together your images of research, in particular if you're having other people in your image. You need to get permission and all of that fun stuff. So the presentation is by Amanda Wakaruk, our copyright librarian with Library and Museums in the Copyright Office. And she'll talk about copyright implications of the CC BY license and using third-party works. And she has provided a video that but will be here in person for the Q&A. So we will be watching a video presentation of hers. And Lucinda is gonna pop the link into chat, I think, right here. Awesome. Oh, Lucinda, there's no sound, at least for me.
My apologies. I'll share it with sound. 1 second. Sorry, what were you going to say, Charity?
Oh, I was just dealing with that myself too. So I'm like, I know a quick way to get around that. So,
no, I know I have to share the sound. Yeah, 1 second.
Hi there, my name is Amanda Wakaruk and I am the copyright librarian at the University of Alberta. While I cannot provide legal advice, I can certainly talk to you about copyright and how it relates to your work as a student. In this short video, I'm going to talk about how copyright relates to your entry in the Images of Research competition organized by the University of Alberta Library and the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research. In short, we want to make sure that you understand your rights and responsibilities related to copyright and also the contest rules related to copyright. So we're hoping that this very short discussion will pique your interest in copyright more broadly, which is why I am including links to opening up copyright instructional modules at certain points in the video series. These modules were created here at the U of A and will give you more information about the topics they link to. Okay, so what do you need to know about copyright if you want to enter this contest? Well, to answer that question, we need to know a little bit about what copyright is. And in broad strokes, you may already be aware that there is a federal piece of legislation called the Copyright Act here in Canada. That statute provides rights holders with the sole right to reproduce, produce, perform, or publish a work. These rights are immediate, time-limited, and transferable. So what this means in practice, essentially, is that as soon as you create something original, like taking a picture with your cell phone, or writing an email, or, I don't know, writing an essay, texting, something like that, you hold the copyright in that work, in that original work, or image in this case, and you have the sole right to reproduce it until the copyright term expires, which is currently set at 50 years past the year of death of the creator. So as a rights holder, you can also transfer those, some or all of your rights that the Act provides you. That might be required as part of some traditional publishing agreements. So just a heads up there. I talk a lot more about that in other sessions focused on graduate students if you're interested. It's also important to note that if you create an image as part of your employment duties, your employer will hold the rights in that image by default, although you might hold the rights as part of a separate agreement, usually specified in your employment contract. So that's really just something to be aware of. So at this point, you might be wondering, well, how does anyone share anything without it being copyright infringement? right? If the rights holders all have the sole right to share their works. Well, in many cases, people are asking permission of the rights holder before sharing things, usually through negotiated licenses. And some rights holders, more and more every year, make it clear to users in advance that they can share those works, sometimes by using an open license, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Or, you know, that sharing could be legally defensible under an exception to infringement in the Copyright Act. One of those exceptions to infringement is called fair dealing, which you may have already heard about. And yes, it is different than fair use, which is a legal provision in United States copyright law. Now, no, not everyone agrees about what is or what is not fair dealing in all cases, and that's part of the strength of the system. For example, you might think it's fair to share an entire copy of a textbook that I wrote. Okay, I might disagree with you about the fairness of that type of sharing and reproduction. So I could escalate that disagreement to the point of a court case. We could go to a court of law and have a judge decide whether or not your dealing was fair. And that's a very short way to sort of describe the copyright legal regime or process here in Canada. But that's the scenario. So the rights holder holds the rights to reproduce the works that they own. Sometimes an exception to infringement will apply to the use of that work by others, but whether or not that exception is legally defensible and it holds up in a court of law can only be determined by a court of law. So obviously, case law helps guide future uses. So that's the whole point. So what the heck does this all mean for your work here with the Images of Research competition? Well, first of all, we're going to talk about the rules themselves, because you do hold the copyright in many works, and most likely, based on past years, the work that you're submitting for this competition. So let's take a closer look at the rules. And I am just going to read from the screen. I apologize here, but that's the way copyright is sometimes. So entry submissions under Section 3, it says eligible entrants will grant the University of Alberta Library the non-exclusive rights to reproduce and or distribute the entry submission in print and digital media in an open access environment under the Attribution CC BY license. This license lets others distribute, remix, tweak, and build upon the entry submission, even commercially, as long as the user credits the eligible entrant for the original creation. Okay, we'll stop there because I want to back up and talk about some of the key phrases in this section of the rules. First of all, we make it clear that you are granting non-exclusive rights to the library. So you hold the rights in the image, and the contest makes it clear that you are allowing the U of A library to share that work. That's it. You're not transferring your copyright. The copyright status is not changing in the work at all. All you're doing is giving the library the right to share your work in an open access environment, which means online without any barriers to access. And they're going to do that by using something called an attribution CC BY license, which stands for Creative Commons Attribution. So that's what BY is, just attribution. So it's kind of repetitious there. Now, these are widely used, internationally known licenses that are more and more popular. So you probably, those of you who are aspiring editors or maybe working as editors have probably noticed that we have a variance in spelling here. On the right, I've used license with the C, and in the text, they're using the appropriate S because this is a US-based organization. And just so there's no confusion, the Canadian Press Style Guide says that a C should be used when you're using the word license as a noun and an S when it's a verb. Now, this is kind of a losing battle, but I just want to throw it out there. If you see inconsistencies, don't always blame typos, okay? Sometimes it's intentional. All right, so that's what that means. I hope that's clear. You're basically just giving the U of A library the right to share your work with an open license. And how are they going to share it? Well, they're going to put it in the institutional repository, which is known as ERA. and looks like this. So this is an example of an image being made available through ERA. And of course, the intention here is to increase the visibility and impact of the work by sharing it broadly. So it's really in the creator's best interest from the perspective of the library. So that's what an image from a past competition looks like in ERA. And the full record is now up for you to review. And there's the link to the license. So if I come to this entry in ERA and I download the image and I think, wow, this is amazing, I want to reuse it, I can do so as long as I respect the terms of the associated license. And those are on the screen in front of you now. So there's a link to the Creative Commons website and specifically the license that's been assigned by the library to that work with permission of the rights holder, right? So the license is telling everybody who visits this site, including me, including you, that you are free to share that image, to copy and redistribute the material in any medium or format, that you are free to adapt it, to remix it, transform it, build upon it for any purpose, even commercially. That's a very broad use. So that's sort of maximizing visibility and impact for the creator and the image itself. Now, its impact is important here because it's elevated because attribution is a requirement of the license. So you can see on the right, it says that users can reproduce this content in many different ways, but they must provide attribution. They must cite the source. They must give you credit for the work. Okay. They also say that no additional restrictions can be applied, so you can't make it less open in a restrictive way. And then at the bottom right, we have a couple of notices, which are good to be mindful of, and it's just making it clear here that other exceptions to infringement still might apply. So if the CC BY license was more restrictive than an interpretation of fair dealing could still apply. And I'm not suggesting that it is more restrictive. I'm just saying that your exceptions to infringement wherever you are in the world are still available to you as a user. Okay, and then finally, the notice at the bottom right just makes it clear that this is about the rights provided under law for copyright, related to copyright, not considering other things like publicity or privacy or moral rights. Those are separate from what the Creative Commons license is meant to make clear. Okay. All right, so that's the gist of it. If you're curious about Creative Commons, it is quite a robust community and network. They do have global summits every year, and those are attended by lawyers and advocates for creators' rights and users' rights. It's a very active community, and they do review and adapt the licenses as needed. There's also a lot of discussion about copyright reform and open educational resources. So it's quite a solid organization, if you will, been around about 20 years. It's a nonprofit organization, but at the heart of it, it's really a set of legal tools that provide rights holders with a quick and easy way to tell the world that a particular work can be shared more broadly. And that's really the key here, that Creative Commons licenses are giving rights holders a way to share their work broadly. So you're telling the world that you're okay with this particular work, this particular image being shared more broadly than what the default copyright law provides users. I hope that makes sense. So this is just more of a reference. This slide is really just provided more as a reference. The CC BY license is the one that the library is going to assign on your behalf. And I just wanted you to be aware that it's one of multiple licenses that are available through Creative Commons. We talked about what it allows, but there are other licenses. So if you run across these, I just didn't want it to be confusing. There are non-commercial licenses. There are no derivative licenses, and those would restrict commercial uses. Those would restrict people from sharing adaptations, and they're not as strong in terms of maximizing visibility and impact, but they might be reasonable and applicable for other types of works in your career. So just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. OER, you can see on the right, there's a green arrow and a red arrow. Most of the licenses that are provided under Creative Commons are OER compatible. So that means they can be shared broadly and adapted for use. Now, OER stands for Open Educational Resources. So in most cases, they're anticipating use in the educational realm. There are a couple that are not considered OER, not relevant to the contest, but just wanted you to be aware that that's the distinction. If they cannot be adapted and shared, they would not be considered OER. And that may become more relevant in other areas of your work as a graduate student. Now, as I said, the library is going to assign that CC BY license on your behalf. But if you wanted to use them for other things in your portfolio, this slide just tells you how you can do that. It's a very simple, free process. There's no formal registration. You simply pick the license that makes sense. You make sure it's clearly indicated on the work itself, and then link back to the license so the user knows what terms your work is being made available under. And if they do not respect those terms, of course, you as a rights holder would have a claim you could pursue if you felt that was the correct course of action. And licenses have stood up in court multiple times over the years. As I said, they've been around almost 20 years now or more. So there's that. Okay, getting back to the competition rules, there's one other place in Section 6 that does mention things related to copyright. And again, I'll read it out here. All original images must be the creative work of the eligible entrants, or they must have obtained the relevant permissions to submit the image and allow the library to use the image as stated in paragraph 3, which we read out earlier. And finally, all eligible entrants are responsible for ensuring that no copyright has been infringed and that any necessary release has been signed. So really, it's just making sure that you understand it's your responsibility to ensure that you're complying with copyright. You understand and are complying with copyright law if the work is not your own in this section. That's what it's referring to. So in most cases, we have found that the graduate student is in fact the rights holder. And that's sort of where it ends in terms of copyright permissions, because you're giving the library the permission by entering to reuse their work. But if that's not the case, you might need to seek permission. And if at any point in that process you'd like more help, you can always email the Copyright Office to ask for it. Or you, and this is just a summary slide, pretty much what I already said. You can ask the rights holder for permission directly. Of course, the Copyright Office has provided a template to help you do that. And if you know the rights holder is not responding and you really want to use that work, and this just to add context, this could be relevant if you were creating a collage of a bunch of other pictures and submitting that as an image to the collection. So it's, as I said, this is going to be a very small number of cases for this contest. But if you cannot obtain permission, you could ask for something called an unlocatable copyright owner license. And I don't think that's ever happened, but I just want to be thorough with the options that are available to you. But really, it's usually much easier and quicker to just find other content if you're not using your own. It's just so much easier to find something where the copyright term has been waived, or the copyright term has expired, or the copyright has been waived by the rights holder, which is the bullets on the right, or if you're just using an insubstantial amount, as copyright only applies to the reuse of a substantial amount. Or more likely, just find stuff that the rights holders already made clear are available for reuse, okay? And just, I know a reminder that the Creative Commons website is available and has a pretty good search engine to help you find CC licensed materials. All right, so the easiest thing to do is to just find stuff that's already available for reuse, including, and probably mostly for this contest, stuff that you own. So if you own the content, then, you know, from a copyright perspective, then you're the one who's giving permission, right? But if not, you should ask for permission or assess whether you can lean on an exception to infringement. And that's a much more involved conversation. And I've linked to some information on the Copyright Office website if you're thinking about whether or not that's applicable in your case. Or you can always, you know, email the Copyright Office and ask for assistance on that point as well. So As I said, I am providing these slides to the contest organizers, and they will make sure you have access to it as a potential entrant. And I hope this overview of copyright and Creative Commons related to the Images of Research contest was useful, and I look forward to the live Q&A after this session.